Welcome back to Deer Farm. Brendan, BRC Fallow Deer. Maybe I need a different introduction on these equipment tractor videos. But today, I want to cover what I've learned using the Tar River Saya-505, I guess would be the model number, no-till drill. Sorry about the sun. It's bright this morning. I've had this on my to-do list for a while. And I finally got a chance this morning. I'm about done with it for the year. So I thought, well, I better do this before. I just want to get it knocked off my to-do list and hopefully help some people out in the process. Because I have learned quite a bit using this drill over the past year. So, a little bit of background. I've got a TYM T474. I don't remember what the spec is on the rear lift. The 3-point, I want to say at 24 inches, it's 1,600 and some pounds maybe. It's not a ton. It's not a ton. It's not a ton for the tractor size. There are some that lift more. But it's at least average or better. So just for the sake, if you're interested in one of these drills, for the sake of comparison, I think it's somewhere around 1,600 pounds. At 24 inches aft of the links. Bugs flying around. So, I did a bunch of research before I bought this drill. I knew I was going to have to add weight to get it to do what I wanted in our clay soils here. And that's what I did. Right out of the gate, I made 2 concrete blocks. These are 248-ish, I think is what I come up with. 248 pounds, give or take, each, adding about 500 pounds to the front of the drill. That has been great. I've had no reason to take them off. If you had tilled soil and you were doing something like clover or something you really needed to be shallow, maybe it would be better to take those off, but I haven't taken them off since I put them on. That, in my opinion, that's a necessity with this drill unless you're in really sandy soil. Anyway, I want to talk about how I've learned to adjust this. I've seen some videos, a couple of which are, it seems obvious in a shop how you would adjust it, but in the field I don't think it works that way. So I've done everything from clovers to wheat, oats, grass seeds, cover crop in the garden, which is a mix of stuff. And it's done well. Sorry, I got bugs flying all over. It's done well. It's not a $15,000 drill. It's not precision ag. But for what I do, planting in, supplemental forage in the deer pens, food plots, that kind of stuff, it's worked really well. There's a lot of people that will tell you, you got to check every bolt, every nut, and I did all of that before I started. As long as you do your homework, you do the prep work when you get the unit, make sure everything's lined up right, I think people are generally happy. But anyway, I don't want to. That's not the point of the video. I want to get to adjusting. So when I get into the field, say I'm just putting in oats. When I get into the field, this is not a great example. I just ran it in a little bit of pasture, so it's got growing sod, buffalo grass, whatever. But when I get it to the field, I also don't normally use a quick hitch with it. Sometimes I do, but I like it better without the quick hitch. I'll drop it down, get it roughly, level-ish, drop it all the way down, and then run the tractor forward, 10 feet. So the idea here, like for oats for example, 1/2 inch to 1 inch is kind of your desired depth for those cereal grains. That's what we're looking for here. The thing to keep in mind with this drill is the weight is only split between essentially 3 points. You have your coulters on the front, the double disc openers, and the roller basket on the back. What I see a lot of people doing is they'll crank down, let me move this so I can point at what I'm talking about. They'll crank the wheels for their openers down as far as they can get it, thinking that's going to put the seed deeper. Well, then their coulters aren't digging in any, so they'll tilt their top link, they'll shorten their top link and tilt the unit forward, put more weight on the coulters. Then they come back to the roller basket and say, well, my roller basket's not turning, So they'll turn these all the way down. They'll turn the adjustment knobs on the roller basket all the way down to put pressure on the ground. Then they'll start going and they'll go, well, now my double disc openers aren't working anymore. So I see that a lot on this roller basket. It's cranked all the way down. To me, that says you've got too much relative weight on either the coulters or the double disc openers. But I want to preface this by saying I have extra weight on my unit, so if you don't, it may not work this way. I would highly recommend the extra weight. So what I do, first of all, you have these springs on the double disc openers. They're just a stationary, you can move a pin to put more spring tension on each row unit. I think the best way to run this is with all of them with the pin in the lowest position, apply spring pressure with the adjustment on top, except for the 2 outboard row units. So those are running behind, on my tractor, they're running behind or through the tire track of the tractor. So that dirt's going to be a little more compressed. I want a little more spring tension on those row units than the rest of them. So whatever's running behind the wheels of your tractor, run a little extra pressure using the clip and the spring adjustment that's in the manual. It describes that. But don't just run all those up and think you're going to gain anything by adjusting the spring from the bottom side rather than the top. Okay, so I'll get in the field. Mine's kind of set up, and I kind of know, I've learned, like, okay, I'm going to do clover. I know I need my top link, a little bit longer. I'm going to do oats. I know I need a little bit shorter. What I want is, for oats again, I want the coulters to run about 1 inch deep. I think technically it's supposed to be like a 1/4 inch more shallow than what you want your double disc openers running, but whatever. This is not precision ag. Get the coulters 1 inch deep, plus or minus. It's a little tough when you're not running through trash because they will lift up over trash. So just an average of about 1 inch deep. Now I've got with that setup, I've got my coulter 1 inch deep. I've got spring tension on the row units. And what I mean by that is the support rod for the row units that contains the spring is sticking up. So you can tell each of these forks is applying spring tension to those openers. That's a good start. And, the more adjustment you have on those openers, the better. That's why I don't like adjusting the spring from the bottom side with the pin, because it reduces the travel of the opener itself. So I want to adjust with the top. That way, if I put more spring tension, that rod comes up out of the spring. Now that opener has some room to adjust as I go over terrain, versus just hitting a stop and that's where it is. While maintaining some spring pressure on the opener itself. So I look at my opener. I've got that, running. I'll stick my hand in between the platform and the opener, and I can feel down in the trench. That's about 1 inch, maybe 3/4, but that's about 1 inch. Generally the outboard ones aren't quite as deep, again, because the tire track that they're running behind. So check one of the inboard ones, and then I'll come back and pull the roller basket. And you can see I can move that just a little bit, but that's plenty of down pressure to operate the mechanism. The roller basket doesn't do a very good job of covering up seed or any of those things. That is definitely a weakness of this drill. In clay soil with any kind of trash, unless you have a loose topsoil layer, it just doesn't cover the seed great. But in my experience, the seed comes up still. I'll have 2 weeks later, I'll have a V from the trench, and there's a seed come up right through the middle. So I don't think it's a huge deal, but the flapper thing on the back, it's not great. Not great for no-till clay into living or recently living sod conditions. So I've got force on my basket, and you notice I've got that thing cranked up quite a ways. So I don't have it pushed all the way down like what you'll see with a lot of people's adjustments, or in the complaints, people will say I ran out of adjustment pushing my roller basket down. What that tells me is they need to go back to zero, pull the basket up, pull their row units, pull them up, reduce the tension, spring tension on those, and get their angle set with the tractor. So that's the thing. You remember that it's split between the coulter, the opener, and the roller basket. That's the weight. So I can tip this thing all the way forward and dig deep with a coulter and then try to crank down my roller basket, but all that's going to do is reduce the weight that's on the coulter. So then I have to crank down more. So then it reduces the weight on the coulter. So then my roller basket doesn't touch. And you see you get into this cycle. So just start with a reasonably leveled unit. Adjust your top link to get your coulter digging correctly. Not digging, but cutting through trash or getting a bit of a trench going. Then go to your row units. Make sure you've got them cranked down enough where you've got some of the adjustment rods sticking up and it's digging to the appropriate depth. Then come back to your roller basket. Make sure you have pressure there. Now all I'm looking for is that roller basket turns when I drive. I'm not trying to apply down pressure with that roller basket. So sometimes if I get into harder soil and I'm running and I haven't touched anything, the roller basket will stop rolling because my coulters and my double disc opener are now not digging as deep. That means I'm utilizing as much weight as possible with the coulter and the openers. I'm not going to be able to dig deeper than that situation. I'll get it set. I'll run about 10 feet. Come behind the drill. I can feel the trenches got covered up by the flaps, believe it or not. I can feel that the trench is about 1 inch deep. And that should make this unit run about as optimally as it's capable of. Of course, one of the downsides is there isn't really a good depth control. There's no depth wheels or anything, so if you have a lot of terrain, not like sloping hills, but shorter terrain, terraces or whatnot, and you're trying to cut across them, it's going to struggle with that because as the tractor tips up, this is going to tip back. There's nothing stopping. Of course, a roller basket's going to then lift the unit, but there's nothing stopping those coulters from digging in significantly deeper, the row units from digging in deeper. Again, it's not precision ag, but running crossways along those terraces, there's little things like that will make it effective enough. All in all, I'm happy with this. For my uses, it works great for the amount of money. So let's say I want to go from oats and I want to plant pure clover and brassicas. Well, I'm going to start by extending my top link and putting more pressure on the roller basket, which again reduces the pressure on the coulter and the row unit. I'm going to start with that. I'm going to put some more pressure until my coulters are just barely touching, just cutting trash if there is trash. And really, to be honest, clover and brassicas, they don't really need much of a trench. I'm just giving this as an example. Extend the top link to reduce your coulter depth, and then run forward and see what your row units are doing. I want 1/4 of an inch, just kind of scratch that surface almost. So in that case, I'm using the roller basket to control my depth. There's really no need, as far as my experience, to adjust this roller basket for even that drastic of a condition change. Just use it as your depth control. It's going to apply more force, which is fine. The big thing is not getting that clover brassicas too deep. Use your top link to adjust the depth of the coulter. Then go to your row units. Use those row units to fine tune the depth of the seed trench. I think that pretty much covers it. It's not a complicated thing once you kind of get that in your mind. There's only 3 places this weight can go. Use your top link to adjust it primarily, row units to fine tune. Make sure your roller basket has enough pressure to operate the chains and run all that. Okay, one other example I want to show is what I've been doing a bunch of recently, which is cereal grains in the front box and a clover brassica mix in the back. It does have 2 seed boxes. It adjusts independently. It does a pretty good job of seed metering. However, both of those seed boxes deposit seed into the same row unit, the same double disc opener. So if I'm running an inch deep for, say, wheat or whatever, I don't want clover and brassicas to be an inch deep. That's, in most cases, that's going to be less than optimal outcome. What I do is just disconnect the tubes for the rear seed box, clover and brassicas. Just put them between the row units all the way across. Hopefully you're able to see that. There's a little bit of leftover wheat seed in the front, or oats or rye, whatever it is. Clover in the back. So what happens is, as I drive forward, the cereal grain's getting deposited into the row unit. The clover is just kind of falling around, around the row unit. And in that case, there's enough dirt worked from the Coulter double disc opener and the roller basket, I guess. It kind of shakes stuff around if you're doing it into, trash or whatever. That the flaps on the back do a pretty good job at spreading that seed out, at least somewhat. So it really has worked pretty well. You end up with a relatively even stand of clover and brassicas with the cereal grains in the trench. It works pretty well. That's how I'm going to continue running if it is again a clover and a brassica. I just disconnect those tubes. That works great. As far as adjustments to the metering boxes, I've found the charts to be relatively close. It gets a little complicated with mixes, especially if there's really large seed that isn't going to flow through a smaller opening. That's trial and error. It's not difficult to calibrate the drill. There's instructions on the charts themselves. There's also a couple of apps for your phone where you can punch data in, as well as I realize that AI is the end of the world, but I'm going to utilize it while I can. I can use Microsoft Copilot, and I can just tell it, here's my drill, here's the number of disc openers, this is the seed, this is how much I caught in 100 feet from one row unit, and it'll spit out my rate per acre. And kind of it'll do it in reverse as well. If you want this rate per acre, shoot for this. It is pretty handy as far as just doing the math for you. And anyway, just an option out there. It's also pretty good if you want to come up with your own seed mix. If I want clover and brassica and red clover and white clover mixed, you can kind of punch all that in your location, and it'll give you rates per acre for the mix itself, instead of going, well, it says 4 pounds per acre of white clover, but I want to put in half red clover, so do I do 2 pounds per acre? It is a handy tool for that kind of thing. So the Saya-505, no real big complaints. I have had loose bolts, especially on this walkway. I had to replace a couple of those. But as far as the adjustment stuff goes, that's pretty much it. I did break a master link on one of the chains came apart. So I'm keeping a master link for both chain sizes in the toolbox of the tractor. I'm keeping a couple of bolts that will fit to the walkway. I tend to check all the bolts about every other time that I use it. Not all the bolts, but the easy ones. Just kind of turn stuff by hand, make sure nothing's loose. It's gonna be a major problem in the field. I did have to adjust the metering gears. They didn't all close quite at the same time, but that's real simple stuff. The Facebook group that's Tar River Owners or something like that has a lot of that good data, good information, things to watch for. That's how I adjust this. That's how I recommend people adjust this. I've seen videos where I think they make it too complicated, and I've seen videos where I think they make it too simple. So if you have any questions or other ideas or things that you've done with this drill, put them down in the comments. I'm still learning. all in all, I'm happy with it. I've used it a lot. Around the new pond, in the pens and pastures, supplemental forage in the pastures, a lot of food plots. I've done food plots for 3 other people at this point, just, word of mouth. Hey, can you come do this? And it's worked out pretty well. So that's all I got for today. Get this video off my to-do list, and hopefully you learned something. So I'll see you next time.